So we know that municipal elections are going to be a little different in the time of COVID-19 right here in the Strait of Canso. The question is, how are they going to work? Well, we've brought someone in to give the Richmond County perspective, and he's very familiar with municipal politics in this neck of the woods. He has served as a councillor for the former District 8, taking in the St. Peter-Sampsonville area, and he was the returning officer for the 2016 municipal elections. He's serving in that same role right now as he's getting ready for 2020's elections in October. We are pleased to have join us on Telile 24/7, Clair Rankin. Thank you for coming into the studio today, sir.
No problem, Adam.
All
Glad
right.
to be here.
Good to have you here. And I want to begin by asking you about that 2016 election, if I could, because we're talking about unusual elections in Richmond County, but that one in itself was quite a challenge because all of a sudden you had to drop from 10 districts to 5. That was the first election for the new 5-member council setup. Can you tell me what that was like?
It was a little harrowing. If you go back, like when I was first elected in '88, they had 11 districts. And then somewhere along the line of 92 or 96, they dropped one, and so it was down to 10. But to go from 10 to 5 was quite an undertaking. We had an enumeration then, door-to-door enumeration in 2016. And then I had to take all those names and look at the new boundary lines and sort people out from where they were before in 2012, and then set them into their new polling district in 2016. It was quite an ordeal, especially when you have people who are used to doing things like they always did. Like there were a couple of misfits. Grand Grave is divided into two. Half the road is in St. Peter's, half the road is in number 5, Lordways. But other than that, we pulled it off. There was one little snafu there at election night, but we got through it, and the councillors were elected, duly elected, and have served since then.
So before we get to the concept that now you have to figure out how there's going to be an election during a pandemic period,
right,
and quite possibly a second wave of COVID-19, let me ask you a little bit about the idea of coming back into that, knowing that at least you have the 5 districts now and you have one of these elections under your belt. Did that give you a little more confidence as you're getting into the process now and starting to prepare for that angle of it?
Well, sure. I mean, I know how the election runs now, and the biggest difference this time around is the fact that because of COVID, we weren't able to do a door-to-door enumeration. And so what we're going on is the electors list from the last provincial election in 2017, I believe. So there's going to be a lot of different people on and off the list. People who have since passed away since the last provincial election. People who have moved into the area are not supposed to be on those lists, and so that's going to be a major job for the revising officer. And that's me as well. So, yeah.
You may not have the answer to this question, but I'll ask it anyway. Is there a reason that you would go, well, nothing like a little challenge every so often. Is there a reason why it would be the provincial electors list and not the federal electors list? Because the most recent election in this part of the world would have happened in terms of the federal election in October 2019. Is there a reason you go provincial and not federal in this case?
That's a good question, and I have to say the only thing I can attribute it to is the fact that most municipalities in 2016 signed a data sharing agreement with Elections Nova Scotia, and so they were able to compile and keep the electors lists from 2016 right down to the very specific addresses and names. So they're readily available from Elections Nova Scotia. I'm not sure where those names and addresses from the federal election are kept. So no, we're all the municipalities in Nova Scotia are using what they call the Elections Nova Scotia list from the last provincial election.
Okay. Yeah. So you and your staff are going to be starting that process of making sure that those names and those addresses line up. How many staff do you typically get for your job in terms of carrying out municipal elections in Richmond County? And has that changed from 2016 to 2020?
Sure, it changed because in 2016 I had all these enumerators. I had about 35 people going around door to door all over the county, collecting names and addresses of names, from people, and they get paid by the name, so there was a lot of incentive there to knock on as many doors as you could. However, this year that's not happening, so the only staff member that'll be on from now until the election day is me. I have somebody in the municipal office, Yvonne Boudreau, who will be my coordinator in the office for ordering things and that. But as far as carrying out the election, there is a chief electoral officer for the province who's readily available for any questions or that I have or concerns. However, even that hit a snag this year, whereas the person that was appointed last year and was supposed to start in February took a leave of absence and then subsequently resigned in May, and they are just now this week appointing somebody new. So the whole scene across the province has been slowed because of that. And so we're just now, they were supposed to announce the name this week, and they're going to hit the ground, believe me, hit the ground running, because there's a lot of questions that have to be asked. And mostly around this revisions list. I mean, we're using a provincial list. So when I get the list, that could be your next question, I get the list, I have to break it down from the provincial polls to the municipal polls. So going back to 2016, where I had to go from 10 to 5, that was one chore. But this year, the chore will be going from what the definition of a provincial poll was and translating the names to a municipal poll. But the day of the election, we have 2 people or sometimes 3 people in every poll. And last election, I had 35 polls, so that was roughly about 100 people employed on election day.
It's one thing to say that you're taking on this challenge now, and it's quite another thing to say that you and the staff that you are going to get have to figure out how to hold a paper balloting election in a time of a pandemic where things are likely not still to be fully reopened and there is a risk of a second wave. So have you gotten any direction from the municipality in terms of how this is going to work? How do you envision this working out at this point? I know we're still early days, but what can you tell me about that?
Nobody's had any direction. To be honest, because of this chief electoral officer hasn't been appointed to give us kind of a baseline, but I can tell you from my own feelings that what's going to happen is that there's going to be more polling stations. Like, for example, in Lordways, we had 4 polls in the same hall. I can't see that working this time. So there's going to be more polls across the county for people to gather and vote in smaller groups. So that's the biggest change.
Yeah, and I imagine you could only have a specific smaller number of people in any given hall or any given room at any point.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that'll increase the number of staff, because whereas in some polls last time we only had a deputy returning officer and a poll clerk, this time we'll need somebody at the door to limit the number of people inside. So the staff will go up probably by a third again, because I'll need somebody at the door to patrol or to monitor how many people are inside the polling station.
Do you anticipate it can run smoothly? And I mean, this is asking you to project into the middle of October when this is all still coming together. Do you have a sense of optimism that this could work?
It's not a long-term commitment when you go to vote. You park, you walk in, you get your ballot, you go mark it, and you're back out of there in, less than 10 minutes, we hope. And so, no, I can see that people will adhere to the conditions we put on them. They're going to be well versed into it now, because there's so many people allowed in the grocery store. You're only allowed so many people in this store, that store. You have to wear masks, etc. So I think that people will know what the concept is and the procedure once they get to the polling station.
Okay. Yeah. I want to ask this, and I ask this only partly joking, only partly tongue-in-cheek. When you accepted the position, first let me tell you, do you apply for this, or were you contacted by the municipality? How did it turn out that you became the RO again?
There was an ad in the paper, reporter, and social media, so no, I applied.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my question then becomes, Clair Rankin, are you a sucker for punishment? You're not only doing this again, but you're doing it at a time when it is going to be quite difficult to be able to figure out how this is actually going to work. Did you look at this and say, I must be out of my mind, or did you see it as part of civic duty, or did you say, aha, a challenge? What goes to your mind when you start taking on this position again?
Look, Adam, I applied for the position 4 years ago because I was royally ticked off at what was happening at County Council. I spent 10 years around that table, and I had a lot of pride in what I did. And to see the council of 4 years ago act the way that they did really hurt me. Not only, like, just a lot of pride. Like, Richmond County was on national news, you know, and I knew that there was a better way. So I wanted the job 4 years ago to do my part in trying to set things straight. And make sure the election ran, you know, well, fairly efficiently, because I knew elections, you know, and I didn't know a returning officer, but I knew enough about elections to help have a good head start on what to do then. So my real emotion, or my real reason for applying for the job 4 years ago, was that, and now it's just, now they had the experience, now they know what to do. It was kind of a moot case to apply again and try and do it again, you know, with less trying circumstances, although the pandemic threw another curve in the mix.
Yes.
Yeah.
Ecclesiastes, and then, of course, the birds saying to everything there is a season.
Yeah.
So you feel right now that this is your season and this is your way to be able to help the county out.
Well, they are paying me as well.
It doesn't hurt.
Yeah. So,
Ecclesiastes never said anything about that.
Yeah. There's a $200 refundable deposit you need to run as a candidate. You need 10 names on the list. You need 10 people to nominate you for a position. We always say try and get 15, because they have to be on the list in your district in order to qualify as a nominator. Other than that, you don't have to wait for a nomination day. You could announce tomorrow that you're running for council and go through start campaigning, putting up signs or press releases or knocking on doors. And I'll say, as a former councillor and somebody who's ran in 7 elections, you know, the earlier you get out there, the better. The longer you can stay on the doorstep, the longer that you make that connection with the voter. So anybody who's contemplating running for council this fall, what's stopping you from getting out there in the summer when people are, you know, glad to be outside, it's not snowing or raining, and you can spend time at the doorstep.
Last question to you, Claire, is if there's anything that needs to be done in terms of residents making sure that they're in their proper place on the electors list, that basically they're ready for this municipal election, what should they do? What would you advise them to do?
Well, I would say that if you've lived in Richmond County since 2017, then your name, you can almost ensure that your name will be on the list, and so you'll be able to vote. However, if you've recently moved to the county, or if a loved one or a relative has passed away, or if somebody you know has moved away, then they should not be on the list, and therefore you should contact the revising officer, which is me as well. However, that doesn't disqualify anybody from showing up at the poll on election day. You can walk in, and even if your name is not on the list, you're allowed to vote in Richmond County. They changed the rule 4 years ago that said you didn't have to produce ID. If you walk into the polling station and you say, I want to vote today, then you just sign an affidavit saying that you are eligible, and we will give you a ballot. We don't check anything anymore. We take people on their good graces and common sense that this is where they want to vote.
And it's helpful to be able to make it that easy, because I know there have been some districts where it's been difficult to get the vote out. I know it was as low as 50% and even 47, 48% last time around. So obviously, especially during this time of pandemic, you're hopeful that that trend will turn, and whatever you folks can do to make it easier for people to vote, you certainly will.
Well, let me, brag a little bit, because in Richmond County 4 years ago, we were one of the highest turnouts in the province. And so that's one thing I'd like to, repeat this time, is have it it was in the 70s, 70% voted in Richmond County last time. And, the trend that everybody else is going around us to the electronic vote is something that, we didn't consider here. We have an older population. There's a lot of connectivity issues. So, we'll just have to try and people informed and ready to go on election day.
Do you see a day, 2024 or beyond, that we might be seeing electronic voting, e-voting or phone voting in Richmond County?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's a lot cheaper to run an election like that, and B, I think that the lowest turnout we have across the board in the province is the younger voters, and so if they everybody's got a phone today, so if they can easily pick that up and vote from their car, their home, they're walking around, then I think you'd see a higher turnout, higher percentage of younger voters voting and taking part and taking. That's a lesson in civic duty, is to vote, and so it'd be great to engage those people to have a turn at electing somebody to office.
Clair Rankin, it's been a pleasure to have you in this morning. Thank you for helping us sift through this, and we look forward to connecting with you again as we get closer to the election.
My pleasure, Adam. Thank you.
All right. Clair Rankin is the returning officer for the second consecutive municipal election here in Richmond County. We've been speaking to him here in our Telile studios, safely and socially distanced.